Hi, I'm Kathleen McDonald, and I'm the Customer Success Manager for CloudArc. I'm here today with CloudArc founder, Steve Snap. This is the first of a series of webinars we are doing to familiarize you with who we are and how we can make Salesforce more accessible to you and optimized for your specific business needs. Originally described as a customer relationship management tool, or CRM, Salesforce is much more than that today and is now one of the most powerful tools available for not only managing accounts and contacts, but also for managing workflow, tasks, orders, quotes, payments, etc. for virtually any business. Really, Salesforce is a blank slate of sorts that can be customized and configured to do whatever you need it to do to help you accomplish your business goals and objectives. But therein lies the trouble for many potential users of the tool. Salesforce is a powerful platform, but on its own can be intimidating to users. At CloudArc, we take the challenges out of the Salesforce adoption using our business model to assist two different customer types and their respective needs through our focus on people, process, and technology. Today, Steve and I will provide you with specific details about the CloudArc business model and how it can be a powerful force multiplier for both existing Salesforce customers as well as new customers in a specific industry or vertical, regardless of whether you're seeking a new solution, and how you can build it on the Salesforce platform. But first, to tell you a little bit more about ourselves. I'm Kathleen McDonald, and I've been with CloudArc for a little over a year. Prior to joining CloudArc, I worked in technology commercialization for over 20 years at one of the world's premier research institutions, Los Alamos National Laboratory. I'm taking that experience and moving technology into the commercial marketplace and applying it to the SaaS world with CloudArc. Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Steve Snap, and I've been working in the CRM world for about 25 years and been working with Salesforce specifically for the majority of that. And I would say my real experience and expertise is really around aligning Salesforce in particular, or CRM or technology in general, with the people and processes. And we're going to talk a lot about that today and how we help reduce risk associated with a significant technology investment. How do we create those results? So I've worked with lots of different clients in lots of different industries. And as I said, I'd say my real expertise is around blending the technology, the people, and the process to create a particular business result.
Great, thank you for that. In addition to Steve and me, we have a team of resources that possess subject matter expertise in the following industries and business practice areas for both the public and the private sectors: medical, construction, manufacturing, private equity and investments, real estate and homeowners associations, insurance underwriting, energy and gas, quality assurance, and even publishing. We all work together to support our customers in their optimization of Salesforce or as new users of the platform through our industry-specific Salesforce-based applications. We have a combined approach of leveraging onshore US-based consultants along with Salesforce architects, and then we also use offshore development resources. Using this process, we maximize value for our clients while maintaining robust quality controls to ensure our customers get exactly what they need.
So one of the things we're going to talk a lot about today is this idea of managing risk. And I think sometimes when I talk about this, it may sound like it's a negative thing, but one of the ways that I like to frame this discussion about risk is that when you purchase Salesforce, and so we're going to talk about customers that already have Salesforce in a minute and customers that don't, but the typical customer that buys Salesforce is probably spending roughly $2,000 per user per year for the license. And after you factor in other expenses and personnel, consultants, internal, external employees, I think that number rises to roughly $5,000. And we've got some blogs about this on our website if you're interested. But if we take that number of $5,000, one of the first things we always want to look for is, are we generating enough value from that $5,000 per user investment to justify the results that we're creating and the usage of the tool? And we have found that most people underemphasize the people and the process component of that, which is why they might be thinking they're just spending $2,000 a user for a license, when after all those costs are factored in, they're spending something closer to $5,000. So if you're spending $5,000 per user per year, what result are you generating? And we're going to talk today about how we blend not just the tool itself, but how do your people use the tool to help them execute those processes efficiently? And how do we generate, in my opinion, you should be generating 5x. So if you're spending 5K per user, you should be generating at least an additional 25K in revenue from that number. And we'll talk about how do you do that. And if you're watching this today and you don't think you're getting a 5x result on your Salesforce investment, then we're going to talk about how you can do that differently so you can create that result.
Great, great. And as I mentioned earlier, our business model is really targeted to two different types of categories. Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the distinction between those two customer types?
Sure, thanks, Kathleen. As I said a minute ago, our CloudArc business model is best suited to existing Salesforce users who are looking to optimize not only their experience, but also their investment with Salesforce. Or it's ideally suited for new Salesforce customers who are a little bit concerned about absorbing all that risk or those license costs up front and are looking for a very specific implementation of Salesforce for their industry that is quote unquote out of the box. Again, all of these things are oriented around how do you reduce that risk. So if you're an existing customer, how do you take advantage of the investment you've already made to create that 5x result that we talked about? And if you're a new customer at Salesforce, how do you purchase the technology in alignment with your current needs and expand over time as your capability to absorb the technology it grows and enhances?
Okay, so you just started to get a little bit deeper into those two types of categories, as we mentioned. Let's talk a little bit more about that. So can you go a little bit deeper into the two types of clients? The number one, existing Salesforce users looking for a different experience or outcome than they've already had. And then number two, those who are entirely new to Salesforce. How about let's start with the first set of clients who are already existing Salesforce users and maybe looking for something different.
Sure. So in the Salesforce world, many customers sign up for Salesforce and either don't realize the amount of assistance they may need to customize and configure Salesforce for their environment, especially when it's hard to find consultants that understand their industry sector, and B, are not prepared to absorb the consulting or customization costs they find that they actually need to get the value out of the tool. Or C, they don't want to or can't pay for that in-house expertise or those Salesforce admin costs to keep that Salesforce org running efficiently and aligned with the solution that they're trying to solve for. And finally, D, some combination of A, B, and C that I just talked about.
Okay, excellent. Could you go into a little bit more detail in each of those scenarios to explain how our approach is different?
Sure. So let's start with scenario A, where the customer has Salesforce licenses for their business, but they realize that they're going to need more consulting support than they originally anticipated to make Salesforce a good fit for their business, a good fit for their business long term. It's often hard to find Salesforce resources with specific sets of knowledge around a specific business or certain industries. So sometimes when working with Salesforce directly, the consultants identified, meaning the consultants that Salesforce refers you to, may not be the best suited or have sufficient experience to optimize, which means customize the tool necessary for the result. And so given that diverse set of expertise that we talked about earlier, CloudArc, our business, can lend tremendous amounts of expertise in fields where we not only do we have a broad depth of experience, but we also have a business process or a model that we use to help that implement it. So again, it's industry expertise combined with a methodology or a framework to create the result. In the scenario B that we talked about a second ago, or that I talked about, I described an existing Salesforce user that's not prepared to absorb the customization or consulting costs needed, even if the consultant does have the strong background in the business industry sector. So in this instance, again, leaning on the experience that we have from prior years of working with Salesforce, we can offer solutions for Salesforce optimization based on what we understand about your business sector. So let me give you an example. We have a customer in the construction manufacturing sector with whom we are working, and they have had Salesforce for about a year or so. They asked us to help them extend the utility of their Salesforce for their organization to help better manage territories and their distributors. So as a building material manufacturer, they needed targeted assistance with a consultant who knows and understands Salesforce, but also understands how do building material manufacturers work with Salesforce. So we are working with them to optimize their reports, their dashboards, as well as how their accounts are tagged as most to least critical builders and or distributors. So these efforts will result in improvements to their Salesforce usage that will enable this customer to better manage tasks, as well as follow up and track progress with certain distributors and builders.
Wow, that's a great example. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you called scenario C? I think where customers don't want to or can't pay for an in-house full-time Salesforce admin, but they need to keep their Salesforce in smooth and efficient running order.
Sure. So we have a couple of customers that are shifting to CloudArc, which means we're taking over the role of not only their Salesforce customization and configuration, but we're also taking over the role of their admin, which means when their users have questions, they reach out to us rather than an internal person. And so for these customers, it doesn't make business sense to absorb approximately 100,000 for a good Salesforce admin when their needs can otherwise be met sort of incrementally through our CloudArc help desk offering. So utilizing our onshore and offshore support to fill that admin gap, we're able to enable them to optimize their use of our team for Salesforce. So for example, we have a reference lab customer that has had internal Salesforce support for I don't know, probably 10 years. However, they have found that the skills and expertise of the individuals in that role were actually quite narrow. So the company is now opting to have CloudArc step into the role to support certain development functions, as well as admin functions to support their Salesforce users directly. So this is working out better for the customer because they can come to us for all of their needs. It also enables them to avoid having to maintain an internal full-time equivalent who may not be able to step into nuanced roles relative to the company's Salesforce needs. So it's a cost savings element, but it also gives them a lot more depth in terms of different solutions that they can create. So they have a couple hundred users. Those users have someone they can reach out to get help that they may need, password resets, etc. But when they need process consulting, for example, or they need a new dashboard built, or let's say they need a custom component built, they don't have just a technical person on staff that's doing something. They've got that broad set of capabilities that we have that we can bring to bear to help solve that particular problem in the way that they need to have it solved.
It's really impressive to see how versatile the offering can be for a customer's needs. And we haven't even gotten deep into the topic of how CloudArc can minimize risk for existing Salesforce direct customers through the partnership that we at CloudArc have with Salesforce. For our audience, we'll cover more of that in a separate webinar when we can dive into those details. And in that discussion, we'll talk more about how CloudArc provides a path for existing users to switch their license provision from Salesforce Direct to CloudArc as a Salesforce partner. And these customers see a longer-term benefit to working with us directly because of our approach and knowledge base that's applicable to their business. This enables those customers to realize the benefits described above, as well as provide the businesses a rebate of sorts based on how our cost model works. So why don't we talk a little bit more about those companies who may be interested in deploying Salesforce for the first time as new users. Steve, tell us a bit more about this business model and how it's advantageous to these types of companies looking to acquire Salesforce and implement for the first time.
Well, I would say that for those that are thinking of implementing Salesforce, usually those people that are evaluating Salesforce have had prior experience with Salesforce. So I'm almost talking to existing Salesforce users that just happen to work for a direct company now. But the main thing that I would say that most people emphasize is they're looking to buy a technology solution, and it's very easy to underemphasize the other areas of the business that need additional help and I guess you could say consulting. So we follow this model that we use where we talk about the people, the process, and the technology. And these are pretty obvious concepts, but people are all the people in your company or customers that we need to make more efficient through better processes. And we use tools like Salesforce to make them more efficient. So to put that in sort of an opposite way, how do we use Salesforce to make people execute process more efficiently? Now, what generally happens is a company says, hey, I'm going to buy Salesforce. It's going to cost me $2,000 per user per year, like I talked about at the beginning. And they don't factor in the other costs. They also don't factor in what is necessary to actually use the tool to create the result that we're talking about. So when I talked a minute ago about thinking about your Salesforce investment as a $5,000 per user number rather than a $2,000 number, gets you into the framework of thinking about all of the other elements. You got people that are dedicating time to this. You got people that instead of doing their job or working on the project or whatever. And so that's where we get the number. And as I said earlier, you need to think in terms of what problems am I solving? And when I solve those problems, will that generate, in my opinion, a 5x result? So in my opinion, that should be 25K per user per year of additional revenue. When I solve this problem, will it generate that? Now, again, I've written about this and those articles are on our website, so I won't go into all the detail here, other than to say that when you're looking at a problem that you're going to solve, you need to evaluate how you'll solve it, and is it worth, is the juice worth the squeeze, or whatever metaphor you want to use. So the main thing I wanted to emphasize here is that it's not just the technology, it's the people and the process that are supported by that technology. And our process is really designed to really go through a systematic way of looking at what problems are we solving, what's the value of solving those problems, how will we solve them. So we know we're going to use Salesforce, at least that's why we think you're watching this, but how are we going to solve them? Are we going to use the least expensive method in Salesforce or the most expensive method in Salesforce? And is there a pro and con to those different approaches? So we call that the design part. So we discover the problem, we design the solution, we scope the solution, we figure out the best way to solve it, given all the other constraints that we're dealing with. Then we build that, whether it's through basic Salesforce configuration or something more complex. We then deploy it. We then train the users, or what we call drive adoption. So there's a very systematic process, and I'm not going through all of that in detail just for the time that we have. But I wanted to mention that it's not just the technical investment, it's the people process investment, and it's going through that systematically so we know what problem we're solving, we know what value we're creating from the solution, and we're creating confidence that we can drive that solution through the user adoption and other things that we're going to do in the business.
It sounds really exciting, especially for these two types of customers we discussed. Either those who are already users, but looking to get more out of their technology because of what CloudArc brings to the process around process and people, or those who are totally new to Salesforce and looking to deploy it for the first time. For the few minutes that we have remaining, let's take a little bit of time to talk about why our process that integrates technology, people, and process is so effective. I think you started to touch on it, but I feel like it's worth really emphasizing with people who are new to CloudArc, what our approach is. We talk within our team and with our customers about the core elements of our process and using the customer portal that we've designed to help reinforce our partnership in real time with that customer. You mentioned them above, but we talk about discovery and requirements gathering, design, which is figuring out what the solution should be and defining that and the architecture that goes with it, developing the solution in terms of creating the actual solution in Salesforce for the customer, demonstrating that to the customer in terms of testing and implementation, delivering through the go live process, and then driving adoption through training and support of our customers over time. It seems like that failure to address each of these aspects, or the Ds that we've listed, is often what causes CRM implementations to fail. In my opinion, just in the year that I've been with CloudArc, we really pay close attention to each and every one of those steps to ensure the customer gets what they need. So, Steve, as we think more about that, and I know we'll cover more of that in a different webinar, do you have any final thoughts on those elements in terms of customer portal, reduce risk, and the 5 Ds that you mentioned?
Yeah, I think we're limited a little bit in time, so we're going a little bit fast here. But I think the real big idea is to limit risk. it's not just enough to say we're going to buy a piece of technology and hope that we create a result. It's understanding that there's a technology component, which, as I said earlier, I think is about $2,000 per user. And then I think, just generally speaking, those other elements are probably $3,000 per user. So $5,000 per user, and if it's 50 users, it's 250K. So I've been talking per user this whole time. But if you're going to spend $250,000 for 50 users and you're going to generate a 25x improvement, you're into the multi-million dollars of additional revenue that we're talking about creating. So how do we ensure that we're going to do that? So the first way just by asking the question, that gets to start, gets people thinking about it, and it starts to put a little bit more context to, if I'm really just using this to manage accounts and contacts, am I going to generate, X million dollars of additional revenue if I do that for 50 people? Maybe not. And maybe that means you shouldn't buy Salesforce. But if you are going to generate X million dollars of additional revenue, how are you going to do that? Is it just by turning it on? And my argument would be no. You've got to be very clear on how what specific processes do you want, and we're talking salespeople here in this example, but what specific things do I want to be able to enable my salespeople to do that is either difficult to do today or inefficient? And let's think through those things, and then let's define how will we use Salesforce to enable those processes to be more efficient. And that's just an example. Now, one of the problems that I think I run into here is it makes it sound like there's this big implementation with millions of dollars of consulting time. And I don't think that's really the message that I'm trying to convey. I'm really trying to emphasize that if you're going to spend $1 on a license, you're probably going to spend roughly $1 on the other things to make that, those $2 worth something. So it's not 15 times the license cost. It's probably about the same as your license cost. But my point is, it's not zero. So if you're spending $2K on a license, you're going to spend $2 to $3K on the other things. And if you know that going in, that's a great start. Well, then once you get into this and you've got your discovery done and you've got your requirements defined and you know what your budget is and you know how you're going to do it in Salesforce, you know how you're going to train your people, and what you're going to emphasize and how you're going to follow up with them and how you're going to hold them accountable, all of those things that go into that plan. Well, we have tools that we use to monitor those processes, and we have tools that we bring our customers into. We call it our customer portal, where we really immerse our customer in the process so they understand where we are on each element. They have total visibility into what our entire team is working on. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have an onshore and an offshore team. So we use our portal to really demonstrate, of those different resources, who onshore is working on something versus offshore, what are they working on? And we use Salesforce to do all of that. So that also reinforces to you, the customer, on how you can use Salesforce to do some similar things in your business. So the point really in emphasizing the dollar amount was simply to put a number against what the investment costs, and then to ensure that we're taking steps to not only recoup that investment, but to generate some kind of upside, whether it's in terms of revenue or gross margin, net profit, whatever. It's just to be deliberate about solving those problems that will create those results for the business.
Great. I feel like the example that you gave in terms of how to think about it as far as the investment in the technology and then the corollary to investment in people and process is really useful for giving our audience something to think about as what is the most appropriate implementation for their business around their technology needs and driving behavior for their customers. So with that, I'd like to thank our audience for joining us and remind them to please come back for future episodes when we'll take a close look at how we've implemented industry-specific Salesforce solutions. And we also are going to talk about the new program, the Salesforce Strategic Outsourcing Partners Program, which we're a part of. We look forward to telling everybody more about those solutions in the coming weeks. Please also check out our webpage and our YouTube content where we will dive deeper into these topics as well. So thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.